Bryce knows that being in camp, that is some valuable reps when you get a chance to play against your ones, especially with what Cleveland has. And I think for Shedeur, the most important thing now is to understand how the rehab process goes. Like, stay in tune, keep your mind going, make sure you're there and available to know all of the information that you need to know so you hit the field and you're back getting to it. It's just unfortunate because what it was becoming, what he made it, I believe, in this preseason was a competition between him, Dylan Gabriel, and Kenny Pickett for that second spot behind Joe Flacco. And I thought if he came out and had another really good performance, there was no way to deny at least a true thought about movement up the depth chart.
We'll see. Again, preseason games are very different than regular season games. He played well. It's kind of...
Don't skip a single second of this video. And if this story touches your heart, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's begin. They said it was a back. Sudden, mysterious, inconvenient. Saturday morning, questionable on the injury report. Sunday morning, inactive. And just like that, Shedeur Sanders, the rookie everyone was whispering about, was benched for the Patriots game. If you watch that pregame footage, you know how ridiculous this all looks. The kid jogging, throwing with the quarterback's coach, launching passes like nothing was wrong. He wasn't limping. He wasn't favoring a side. He was moving like a guy who planned to play. Then a team statement, a coach's measured answer, and silence from the sideline. It should have been a simple medical update. Instead, it became the moment fans stopped buying the Browns story. Enter Eric Dickerson, Hall of Famer, not one to mince words, who dropped a bombshell on live TV and called Stefanski out as a liar. That's not locker room whispering. That's the kind of public smack that turns a sports controversy into an institutional question. When a legend says the team had ulterior motives, people listen. Social feeds exploded. You're in free Shedeur trended. Clips of Shedeur warming up were rewatched, slowed down, analyzed frame by frame. Fans weren't just mad, they were suspicious. This wasn't raw injury drama. It smelled like politics. Let's be clear, timing matters. This wasn't a mid-season tweak or a Friday maintenance day. This popped up right when the conversation in Cleveland was changing. When coaches were getting pressure, when Dylan Gabriel had just not done enough, and when the Browns looked like a team desperate for answers. You don't go from throwing on the sideline to inactive unless there's either a real medical emergency or a narrative someone wants to control. And that's the problem. Control. What twisted the knife was the optics. Dylan Gabriel throws 2 interceptions in a beatdown, the offense looks broken, and the one player who could at least flip the script is suddenly out. A bench that smells like protectionism is worse than a bad play caller. It's a system that protects names and numbers instead of talent. And when a respected voice like Dickerson says the league or the team is bending the rules to send a message, you stop treating this like isolated coaching decisions. You treat it like a pattern. Fans reacted the way fans always do when they sense injustice, loudly and immediately. Threads filled with outrage, highlights with captions like, "Why isn't he playing?" and former players calling out the strange timing. The narrative shifted from injury update to who's being protected and why. People started asking the one ugly question teams hate, is this about football or something else? This wasn't just a missed game. This wasn't just a tactical decision or an unfortunate timing. This was about control and about who gets to rise in this league. You can't talk about what's happening in Cleveland right now without admitting one ugly truth. This team has a history of breaking its own quarterbacks. Every time they find a spark, every time they get close to something real, the system finds a way to smother it. It happened with Baker Mayfield, the guy who dragged that franchise out of the mud, beat Pittsburgh in the playoffs, and still got thrown out like bad PR. It's happening again now, only this time it's quieter, cleaner, hidden behind injury reports and coaches' decisions. And if you're paying attention, you can see it plain as day. Cleveland hasn't learned a thing. The Browns love to talk about culture, about competition, about accountability. But when it comes to quarterbacks, it's not about competition. It's about control. You draft a guy high, you sell his jersey, you commit to him publicly, and suddenly the locker room becomes political. Dylan Gabriel was supposed to be the safe choice, the higher pick, the more polished prospect. Shedeur, he's the wild card, the one with a famous last name and a spotlight the organization didn't build. That scares people who crave structure, who want control over the story. You saw it in the way Kevin Stefanski talked to the media all week. Evasive, overly calm, no urgency. We'll evaluate him day by day. It's a medical thing, the kind of answers that sound professional but tell you nothing. And that's exactly the point. Say enough to quiet the room, but not enough to invite accountability. Because the moment they admit Shedeur's ready, they have to explain why he's not playing. And don't think this kind of internal politics doesn't exist everywhere. We've seen it with Jalen Hurts when analysts swore he wasn't ready. We saw it with Justin Fields when the narrative flipped on him before he even got comfortable in the pocket. When a young quarterback comes in and threatens the balance, the coach's comfort zone, the veteran's image, the organization's pecking order, things get messy. They don't want a disruptor. They want someone who fits the plan. The problem is, Shedeur Sanders doesn't fit anyone's plan but his own. And that's where the fear starts. He wasn't supposed to outshine the veterans this fast. He wasn't supposed to draw fans away from the team brand and toward his own. He wasn't supposed to look like the guy in camp, but he did. And instead of leaning into that energy, instead of saying, maybe this kid is what we need, the Browns pulled the oldest move in the book. They hit pause, hide behind development, pretend it's protection. In reality, it's hesitation dressed up as strategy. We've seen this movie before, and it never ends well. A franchise afraid of momentum, afraid of its own reflection. Because when a team chooses politics over potential, it tells you everything about who they really believe in. Let's be real. This isn't just about football anymore. It never was. When Eric Dickerson said black players aren't allowed to speak out, he wasn't exaggerating. He was exposing a truth that's been simmering under this league for decades. And now it's landing squarely on the shoulders of Deion Sanders' son. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just a quarterback. He's a symbol. He's young, confident, educated, and unapologetically proud of who he is. And that scares people who've built their careers controlling that image. See, the NFL loves a comeback story. They'll celebrate you as long as you stay quiet, smile for the cameras, and fit the mold. But once you start owning your narrative, once your brand becomes louder than the logo on your helmet, they start calling it distraction. They start whispering about humility. And suddenly, you're not the golden kid anymore. You're too confident, too media-driven, too much. That's exactly what's happening with Shedeur. His name alone makes execs nervous, not because of what he's done wrong, but because of what he represents. Independence. Deion Sanders spent his career breaking rules the right way. Flash, faith, and ferocity, all in one. He built primetime into a brand so big that it outlived his playing days. And now he's passing that same DNA down to his son. Shedeur learned from day one that you don't wait for approval. You build your own platform. You don't beg for validation. You earn it with work and swagger. And in a league that still wants to own its players, that's revolutionary. That's why every time Shedeur walks into a press room, it feels like the NFL is holding its breath. Because he's not supposed to be that self-aware, that media savvy, that composed. Then came the draft. Remember what Mel Kiper Jr. said? In 30 years, I've never seen anything like this. Shedeur's stock didn't fall because of his mechanics, or his decision-making, or his stats. He led his conference in passing accuracy. He took more hits than most college QBs could survive, and still stood tall. But come draft week, the tone changed. Scouts started using coded language. Not sure how he'll fit in a locker room, concerns about the spotlight, wants too much control over his brand. That's not analysis. That's fear disguised as professionalism. You don't drop 4 rounds by accident. You drop when people make calls behind the scenes. You drop when teams decide you're too outspoken, too independent, too different. And when your last name is Sanders, they don't just see a player, they see a statement, a challenge to the hierarchy, a reminder that players can now build empires without permission. That's why they're really coming for him. It's not about a back injury. It's not about competition. It's about a league that's still uncomfortable with a young black quarterback owning his story, his voice, and his future. This isn't a coincidence. It's a message. You know what's crazy? After all the chaos, all the noise, all the finger pointing that came out of Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders didn't say a word. Not one rant, not one post throwing shade. No, they did me dirty tweet. Just silence and faith. And in a world where every player rushes to post receipts, that silence hit louder than anything Stefanski could have said at a podium. While the coach was out there explaining away losses, talking about adjustments and execution, Shedeur was back in the film room, hoodie up, headphones on, locked in. No cameras, no entourage, just the grind. You could almost feel that quiet hunger coming off him, like he wasn't interested in proving people wrong anymore. He was just ready to prove himself right. And that's the shift, man. That's where maturity shows. Because Shedeur could have played the victim. He had every reason to. The narrative was stacked against him. Overhyped, not ready. Deion's kid can't handle the pros. But instead of feeding the fire, he walked right through it. Calm, measured, centered. He posted just one thing, a single line that said, "God's timing is perfect." No anger, no subtext, just faith. And that one sentence said everything about who this kid really is. You could see the influence of his father there. The Deion effect. Say what you will about Coach Prime, but the man taught his sons something deeper than swagger. He taught them patience, discipline, and how to trust the process even when the world's laughing in your face. And I think that's what people miss about Shedeur. He's not trying to be flashy for attention. He's trying to build something. He's watched his dad rebuild programs, take hate from every direction, and still show up with grace. That stuff rubs off. It's in the DNA. You can tell he's internalized it. His body language changed. The frustration you saw earlier in the season, gone. Now it's focus. You see it in the warm-ups, in the quiet sideline moments. There's a steadiness there that wasn't before. He's realizing that this league tests your character just as much as your arm. And the wild part? Fans noticed. You start seeing comments shift. People who once clowned him now saying, "Respect." Kids handling it like a pro. That's the kind of redemption arc that doesn't happen from stats or headlines. It happens in how a player carries himself when nobody's clapping. That's the breakthrough right there. Not a touchdown, not a highlight, just grace under fire. While others talk, Shedeur works. While they point fingers, he studies film. While they write him off, he writes the next chapter. And deep down, every real football fan knows what that means. Because we've seen this story before. The ones who stay quiet, who stay faithful, who keep showing up. They're the ones who rise when it matters most. He's not done. Not even close. They can delay him, but they can't deny him. There's always that one moment, that single game when everything changes. When the cameras stop doubting and start believing. When the critics go quiet and the whole league finally realizes they've been sleeping on a problem. And I'm telling you right now, Shedeur Sanders is one game away from that moment. Because this story, it's never been about hype. It's been about heart, about a young quarterback walking through the same storm his father faced, the whispers, the politics, the media games, and still standing tall. Every generation gets tested, and now it's Shedeur's turn. But what the league doesn't seem to get is that this kid was built for the fire. We've seen this script before. They said Jalen Hurts wasn't a franchise QB until he dragged Philly to the Super Bowl. They said Lamar couldn't throw until he won MVP. The league always needs to see it before they believe it. But Shedeur's been showing it his whole life. Arm talent, check. Pocket control, already elite. Leadership, it's in his blood. And yet for some reason, they keep brushing him off like he's a brand, not a baller. That's what's broken about this league sometimes. Politics over performance. Who you know, not what you've earned. But the thing about real talent, you can't bury it forever. It finds daylight every single time. Because sooner or later, Shedeur's going to get his shot. Whether it's off an injury call, a trade, or a desperate franchise that finally sees the light. And when that day comes, When he walks onto that field and starts slinging darts like it's Boulder all over again, the same voices that mocked him are going to switch sides real fast. That's the reckoning moment. The one where highlight reels start with, "Nobody believed in him," and end with, "But look at him now." That's the day the NFL wakes up and realizes this kid wasn't writing his father's name. He was building his own legacy under it. And let's be real, that legacy runs deep. They tried to blackball his father once, and remember? Too flashy, too outspoken, too unapologetically confident for a system that didn't know how to handle it. And yet, Deion still became prime time. He changed the game without asking for permission. Now they're trying to do the same thing to his son. Keep him on the sideline. Downplay the potential. Question the pedigree. But greatness, real greatness, doesn't fade just because the league's uncomfortable. It waits, it works, and then, when the lights are brightest, it shows up and makes believers out of everyone. So if you're still doubting Shedeur Sanders, that's fine. Keep watching. Because his moment's coming, and when it does, it won't just be a comeback. It'll be a statement. They tried to silence his father. They tried to bury his name. But greatness has a funny way of finding daylight. If you believe his story isn't over, drop A in the comments. Because when Shedeur's time comes, the same people who doubted him will be the ones screaming his name.